Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're taking an incredibly emotional journey right into the heart of what I'd call a true psychological mystery. We're going to completely reframe what you thought you knew about the classic story, Hyouka. Because this isn't just a basic plot recap. We're diving deep into the atmosphere, the hidden meanings, and the profound, almost suffocating tragedy buried beneath a seemingly ordinary high school club. So let's just jump right in.
Think about this for a second. What if the title of your favorite mystery series was actually a desperate cry for help? It's so easy to look at the Classics Club and just see a lighthearted group solving trivial, everyday mysteries. But we're challenging that today. We're going to uncover the heavy themes of regret, suppressed emotion, and the absolute paralyzing fear of wasting your life, all of which sit at the very core of this narrative.
To really grasp this, we have to start with our protagonist, Houtarou Oreki. Emotionally distant, detached, entirely unbothered. He operates on this strict, self-imposed policy of energy conservation. But this isn't just laziness. It's actually a defense mechanism. He's purposefully avoiding emotional investment, choosing to live what he actively calls his gray-colored life. There's a really fascinating psychological contrast at play here. On one side, you've got the gray-colored life. It's safe, it's efficient, but it completely avoids all emotional risk. And then on the other side, the rose-colored life, filled with passion, energy, risk, and true, messy human connection. Throughout the story, Oreki actively avoids this rose-colored life simply because he's afraid. He's terrified that caring too much might just end up breaking him.
But then, a really subtle shift happens. Picture this. It's a gorgeous orange sunset. Oreki is just leisurely pedaling his bike alongside his friend Satoshi. And in this incredibly rare moment of vulnerability, Oreki makes a confession that basically changes everything. He just admits, I guess I'm just tired of having a gray-colored life. He finally says out loud to Satoshi and to himself that he might actually envy the people who live passionately. He wants to experience it. That single admission is huge. It brilliantly illustrates his internal conflict. As he's just staring out that window, we're seeing the very first major crack in his entire worldview. He's starting to realize that a completely gray life, sure, it keeps you safe from pain, but it might also be terribly, desperately empty. The mystery he's investigating, it isn't just about the past anymore. It's forcing him to figure out what kind of life he actually wants to live. And right as Oreki is grappling with all this, the narrative completely shifts gears. He's lying in his room, staring at the ceiling, and the phone rings. It's an international call from his eccentric older sister, Tomo, all the way from Yugoslavia. Up to this point, Oreki had comfortably deduced that the student from 33 years ago, Sekitani Jun, was just this willing hero who sacrificed his high school life to save the school festival. But that one simple phone call, it totally shatters that illusion. When Oreki proudly mentions this heroic tale to his sister, her reaction is honestly chilling. She doesn't celebrate it at all. She just flat out says, "That's a tragedy. I don't like that." And this is crucial. That single negative reaction forces Oreki to completely recontextualize this entire 33-year-old mystery. Tomei understood something profound that the club missed. If she's calling it a tragedy, then Oreki's neat, comfortable little deduction is fatally flawed. Which leaves us with this incredibly heavy question. Was the hero Sekitani Jun actually a willing sacrifice? Let's really sit with that for a second. We're pivoting right now from a safe, comfortable status quo straight into a really dark investigation of a tragic misunderstanding. What if Sekitani didn't choose this fate? What if he wasn't a hero at all, but just a victim? To find the truth, the club tracks down the school librarian, Ituwakawa-sensei, who actually lived through all of this 33 years ago. And the historical timeline she lays out is essentially a steady march toward disaster. In April, the principal abruptly cuts the 5-day cultural festival down to just 2 days. By June, this sparks massive student protests. Then, one night during all the chaos, a campfire gets out of hand and the martial arts dojo catches fire. Finally, in October, Sekitani Jun is expelled to take the blame. But here is the genuinely heartbreaking reality behind that timeline. The resistance was huge, sure, but nobody wanted to take actual responsibility. The students were great at shouting slogans, but when it came to leadership, they were cowards. So how did Sekitani Jun become the leader? They literally drew lots. Sekitani just drew the short straw. He was never a willing leader. He was forced onto the stage by a student body that completely refused to stand up for themselves. And the crazy thing is, the original cover of the Hyouka anthology secretly confessed this tragic dynamic the whole time. It shows a rabbit leading a dog in circles, while all the other rabbits just sit there and watch. The dog represents the school administration. The watching rabbits? That's the cowardly student body. And that lone rabbit risking absolutely everything? That's Sekitani Jun. He became the silent scapegoat for a crowd too scared to own up to the dojo fire. Which brings us to the title of the anthology itself. Hyouka. We really have to reconsider what this supposedly whimsical word meant to an expelled, completely isolated teenager. For decades, students celebrated this festival completely blind to the suffering that built it. But Sekitani Jun, he left behind one final hidden message for the descendants of the Classics Club. Oreki realizes that the title isn't just some random word. It's actually a brilliant bilingual play on words. In Japanese, Hyouka translates to ice candy or ice cream. Initially, Chitanda and the rest of the club are totally baffled. Why on earth would you name a club anthology after a dessert? But if you take that English translation and look just a little bit closer, ice cream. I scream. It's right there. This is the moment the sheer tragedy of it all just crashes down. Sekitani Jun couldn't voice his anger. He wasn't allowed to express his sense of betrayal, so he hid his desperate, agonizing cry inside a pun. I scream. It was never a heroic tale. It was the suppressed, suffocating pain of a silenced victim. Sekitani Jun was essentially offered up as a human sacrifice for his peers, and his entire life was permanently derailed because of it. And honestly, the most devastating part? For 33 years, students joyfully danced and celebrated the Kanya Festival, using a name that was secretly just a tribute to his sacrifice. They celebrated without ever understanding the agonizing pain of the boy who protected them. When the truth is finally spoken out loud, the emotional dam just breaks. Chitanda suddenly remembers the suppressed childhood memory. She remembers asking her uncle why the book was called Hyouka, and she remembers him telling her, desperately, to be strong. With tears streaming down her face, she finally understands his warning. He was telling her to be strong so she wouldn't end up silenced, just like him. He was warning her about the utter terror of being alive while being completely dead inside. Moving forward from a revelation that heavy takes time. It requires real healing. They published the new anthology, finally putting the true, unvarnished story into writing. Chitanda visits her uncle's grave, offering him the manuscript to honor his memory and properly, finally, say goodbye. Uncovering this heavy truth allows the entire Classics Club to heal, and we start to see Oreki undergo this incredibly quiet yet profound character growth. Which brings us right back to Oreki's great colored life. He realizes now that Sekitani Jun's tragic fate isn't just history, it's a profound warning. Sekitani was forced into silence. His rose-colored life was violently ripped away. Oreki understands that choosing a silent, detached existence, choosing to just never care, never engage, well, that's a tragedy you inflict on yourself. The author masterfully blended real historical inspiration with fiction here to explore deep human vulnerability, and the core philosophical themes are just incredibly resonant. It's about the fragility of memory and how quickly a victim can be falsely repackaged as a hero. It's about the heavy, crushing burden of regret. But above all else, it's about the power of curiosity. It's about making the active, scary choice to connect with others. We see this growth so beautifully illustrated when Oreki writes a letter back to his sister in Sarajevo. He reflects on how the Classics Club has completely changed him. He's quietly accepting that curiosity and human connection are fundamentally altering how he views the world. He isn't fighting it anymore. He's letting Chitanda and the rest of the club slowly pull him into the light. And we're left with this absolutely beautiful final realization. Bathed in the warm light of the sunset, Chitanda rushes in with a brand new mystery, saying she's curious. In Oreki, he doesn't resist. He just follows her. He finally gets it. A rose-colored life, despite all of its inherent risks, despite the very real pain it might bring, is far, far better than an empty, gray one. Because Hyouka was never really about solving a mystery. It was always about understanding people. It was about the fear of wasting your youth and learning how a simple spark of curiosity can save you from a gray, empty existence. So as we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with one final thought. Are you willing to risk the pain, the regret, and the vulnerability to experience a truly rose-colored life? Thanks so much for exploring this journey with us.